Something you might not know about me, but may have guessed from watching my videos or streams, is that I am a deeply anxious person. I can get overwhelmed by my own thoughts and worries pretty easily, and basically convince myself that I'm either crazy or dying right now in this moment. Oh my god. It can get especially bad when I'm not taking care of myself in the important ways, by neglecting sleep, not eating enough, not interacting with the sun, but at no point is it worse than when I'm around someone I don't feel comfortable with. And I mean that in a very specific way. When talking about strange social behavior, I think it's important to clarify the difference between weird and dangerous. It's almost a sliding scale, and different people will have different thresholds for when you've gone too far along that scale, especially in comparison to their own perceived weirdness or normalcy. For instance, I spend time with a number of people who believe in magic, with a capital M. Manifestation, crystal stuff, tarot, star signs. I hope I'm not being reductive, but most of these practices fall into a category of belief that separates itself from measurable recorded data and physics. Like a lot of religion and spiritualism, it's founded on an internal system of beliefs, and how it personally makes the individual feel to practice it. I don't personally believe in magic, for similar reasons to why I'm not religious, but for the most part, I'm never concerned to learn that someone is attempting divination, or believes in God. To me, and again, I mean no disrespect with this, that's a weird belief that doesn't bother me at all. Basic human empathy dictates that if another person's choice or belief doesn't negatively impact you or others, then it's just not your concern. However, there comes a point where weird veers into, let's say, concerning. You want to call yourself a witch and collect animal bones? Sure, live your truth. But if you tell me you're using magic on me, even positive luck magic or something like that, that would throw up a warning sign inside my brain. Not because I believe I've actually been cursed or influenced or whatever, but because it's suddenly become clear to me that the idiosyncrasy that was just a bit of interesting characterization for you is now, in one sense or another, attached to me and my life. You're trying to do something to or with me in a way that I don't quite understand or have agreed to. Now, like I said, different people have different thresholds for weirdness, so to some of you, I probably sound hugely judgmental. That's not my goal. I just want to put you in the right headspace to understand exactly the trick Mark Duplass is playing when he performs as the character Joseph, and later Aaron, in the movies Creep and Creep 2. How he toes the line between weird and concerning, how he manipulates his victims into ignoring his many red flags, how he can flip between charmingly pitiable and unnervingly intense in a matter of seconds. Creep and Creep 2 are incredible cautionary tales about trust, benevolence, and the danger of charming people. So why don't you come along with me as we look at one of the most interesting and frightening killers I've ever seen depicted in a horror movie. This is gonna be a good day. In this video, we'll just be covering the plot of the original film Creep, but if you like this, let me know and maybe I'll follow it up with Creep 2. Creep has, essentially, two characters. Aaron, a videographer who seems somewhat down on his luck and willing to ignore some warning signs to make a little money, and Joseph, a man who I'd have a hard time telling you anything concrete about. For the time being, I'll introduce him the way he introduces himself. Hi! Okay, but actually, Joseph is a married man with a child on the way. His wife, Angela, has been with him for 6 years but isn't here. Joseph is a cancer survivor. He had it in the liver and the lungs, went into chemo and had no problem knocking it out and going into remission, but unfortunately has recently discovered that there's a large, inoperable tumor in his brain and that he has a few months to live. He's hiring Aaron to document him throughout his day, so that when his son, who he calls Buddy, is born, he'll have an idea of who his dad was before he died. On paper, this is an incredibly tragic and moving story for Joseph's character, and in another type of movie, like the one he's referencing, the following scenes could be powerful and emotional as this man explores his life, relationships, and mortality, all while bonding with a stranger who he met through pure coincidence. But this movie is called Creep, so we as the audience know to be a bit more cautious about Joseph's demeanor when we meet him. Here are two things I'd like to point out just from this introduction. 1. Joseph gives no proof that any of the things he says are true. We don't meet Angela and see no pictures of her. Joseph, for being a man dealing with brain cancer, does not have any documentation or cancer treating essentials around the house. We see no ultrasounds or preparations for the incoming baby. The interesting thing about this detail is that despite the lack of evidence, the story, especially the more emotional moments of it, helps Aaron give Joseph the benefit of the doubt upon meeting him. We don't see any treatment items because this is a vacation home. They're probably at his regular home, or maybe in a hospital. Angela isn't here because she's dealing with her pregnancy, or it's too emotional for her, or any number of realistic explanations. It still doesn't explain why there's no pictures of any of them on the wall, but Aaron isn't a detective perspective, he's just a young man in need of cash. Surely he can put up with a little strangeness, which leads me to my other important observation. Joseph, when explaining how he came to know about his brain tumor, states that before his diagnosis, he had been encountering, quote, weird cognitive misfirings. Early on, this might be heard as just a throwaway line, but later, you might start to wonder if Joseph said this so Aaron would have a higher tolerance for strange behavior. Now, anytime Aaron questions the actions of Joseph, he'll be able to explain it away as a byproduct of his sickness. When we meet him, he has already given us a reason not to trust him. He wasn't where he said he'd be when Aaron makes the drive up to his cabin, and he's not answering his phone. He's unreliable, but Aaron looks past it, despite being concerned about the location and the fact that he saw an axe on his walk up to the location. But still, it's early enough in the film and the fictional day that we could still give Joseph the benefit of the doubt. What really should act as the first warning sign for Aaron that something is at least a little off is when Joseph, minutes after meeting Aaron, gets naked and asks Aaron to film him in the tub. I'd like to pause the analysis now and ask you, if you were desperate for money and had the opportunity to make $1,000 in 8 hours, would you be comfortable doing something like this? Probably not, but you might still do it. For one thing, Joseph has set up this tragic narrative and seems friendly enough so you can potentially understand the meaning behind the action. That being, Joseph trying to enjoy what he calls tubby time with his son in the only way he can before he's gone. And for another thing, in the back of your mind, you can compare all the other ways you might make $1,000 in one day to this situation and potentially convince yourself you've gotten the better deal. Joseph is super reassuring, acknowledging the strangeness of this request and checking in to see if Aaron is okay. And the picture currently being painted by the character, I imagine intentionally, is that despite any perceived weirdness, at heart, Joseph is a good man. So, long story short, Aaron is filming a naked grown man pantomiming giving a bath to his yet unborn infant son. It's uncomfortable, but Aaron has already made peace with the fact that this whole day will likely be uncomfortable. That is, until Joseph really sours the already strange mood by beginning to speak of his mortality a bit more intensely, about the pain of his approaching death and how he wonders why he even bothers waiting for the end. When Joseph's head slips beneath the water of the tub, Aaron clearly doesn't know how to react, unsure how serious Joseph is, until Joseph suddenly jumps out at Aaron screaming. It was meant to be a joke. Joseph really likes scaring people. This introduces an element to Joseph's character that I think is very familiar to most people. Have you ever met someone who is definitively and unequivocally not funny, but who keeps trying to make jokes? That kind of person who says, "Oh, sorry man, I've just got a twisted sense of humor," as if that was your issue with them. It's the kind of person who is desperate for positive feedback, but is incapable or unwilling to recognize that their current method is not working. So instead of changing it, they double down, go darker or louder or just more frequent. Like many of Joseph's personality traits, it's not evil or immediately clockable as a threat, but it does represent a sort of social disconnect that might make you wonder about Joseph's other beliefs and decision-making skills. And to be clear, not being funny or being socially awkward are not crimes. If they were, I'd be in prison. But in this sense, it's an indication that the norms of reality that Joseph exists in are different from the norms of Aaron's reality. Now, mix this with Joseph's propensity for scaring people. It goes hand in hand with being a jokester like Joseph, because obviously the best possible outcome after scaring someone is them laughing, relief mixing with their adrenaline as they realize how you got them. This tends to work better, though, with people you know and trust, not strangers you're currently filming naked. When Joseph scares Aaron, he laughs, but Aaron doesn't. Joseph is not reading the situation correctly, unless his scares are meant to be a bit more intimidating. Other times that Joseph scares Aaron, he makes it into a sort of philosophical lesson. It's hard to believe that these little moments are so casual when after Joseph starts talking about Aaron having murder in his eyes and how that's allegedly a good thing. If you haven't seen Creep and you're just hearing me bounce from strange interaction to strange interaction, you might be wondering why Aaron puts up with everything he's putting up with. And that's a really good question. As I've already explained, money clearly factors into it, as well as Aaron giving Joseph a lot of the benefit of the doubt, but it goes further than that. Aaron is kinda dumb. No shade, he's definitely not the dumbest horror character I've ever encountered, but he makes a lot of questionable choices when it comes to his own self-preservation. Let me walk you through some of the interactions that Joseph has, and you tell me at what point you'd leave the situation. Aaron drives way into the middle of nowhere to film someone he's never met, who startles him the first time they meet. Aaron is immediately given a hug by this stranger. Within 10 minutes of meeting the stranger gets completely naked in front of him. The stranger, still naked, pretends to drown himself. I'm sure some of you would have bounced by now, but others might stick around. I mean, Aaron's already been paid by Joseph. One could argue that since he's already made the money, he has no obligation to stick around, but I'd argue the opposite. Joseph has committed him to the day. If he had elected to pay Aaron at the end of the day, he would have been leaving Aaron the room to change his mind at any point and pay more attention to his own concerns. However, already having the money in his pocket, Aaron would now seem, at least probably in his own head, rude or selfish if he suddenly decided to leave. He could give the money back, of course, but the film has also been implying that for whatever vague reason, he really needs it. And so, with that cash in his pocket, he forfeits some of his control over the situation. situation. But of course, as I'm sure some of you realize, this is only a social restriction. Joseph doesn't have him at gunpoint or anything, but that's what's so effective about creep. It is, partially, about the intensity and danger of being polite. See, the thing about being polite is that it's not the same as being good, but we've convinced ourselves that it is, and by extension that being impolite is bad. It's a kind of complicated word to use, as some define politeness as being respectful and considerate, whereas others tie it more to etiquette and manners. But what remains true in all definitions is that it is associated with your behavior towards others. A behavior that is, like many human qualities, subjective and impossible to concretely quantify. It is for these reasons that politeness, or if you prefer, the desire not to hurt or offend, is used as a tactic by predators. In many cases of, well, you know, the victim can often be identified by their abuser ahead of time, and depending on their situation, their abuser can leverage social norms to make them feel safe, get them alone, discredit their thoughts or concerns, or even defend their predatory actions after the fact. For children, one might abuse the fluctuating societal expectation that kids are meant to listen to and obey their elders without question. For women, abusers have been known to put pressure on their targets by making them out to be rude, selfish, or hurtful for calling them out or trying to avoid concerning situations. Minority groups can be targeted by people impersonating officials like the police. Even men can fall victim to this through the questioning of their masculinity, making them seem weaker and less worthy of respect for simply calling out their own abuse. The point is, no matter who you are, you can become vulnerable to this type of manipulation if you care at all about the way others see you, even the people who want nothing but the worst for you. Aaron is a lot of things. He's jumpy, desperate, a little naive, but clearly he's also nice. Or at least, he tries to be. When Joseph asks him to do strange things, he doesn't mock or question Joseph's requests, not at first, and definitely not openly. When Joseph apologizes for something, even something as obtrusive as secretly taking pictures of Aaron before they met, which we'll get to, he accepts the apology, and even seems to go out of his way to try to understand it. Even when one of the big revelations comes about Joseph, a revelation that for most people would result in a complete and total stop to all positive interactions, Aaron exhibits understanding and a willingness to help Joseph. Aaron's niceness is partially why what happens to him happens, but let's get to that later. After the bath scene, as Joseph and Aaron are preparing to take a walk through the nearby woods, which at least for me would raise some more red flags, we're introduced to Peach Fuzz. As Joseph explains, Peach Fuzz is a character that his father came up with, this scary-looking wolf character who is actually kind and misunderstood. Joseph sings a rhythmically incomprehensible song attached to the character where he claims that, despite looking dangerous, he just wants to be your friend. A sentiment that, interestingly, is the inverse of Joseph's actual character. That being, a person who seems friendly on the exterior, but who is actually very dangerous. Out in the woods, Joseph and Aaron are looking for a nondescript, heart-based location that he and his wife allegedly heard about from this, quote, very cool Hispanic lady who runs the taco truck down by the lake. And the only reason I bring up that quote is because I feel pretty confident that Joseph made up this lady, and his phrasing just feels awkward and funny in the way that so many of his moments do. The movie is not doing anything to hide how strange and at points out of touch Joseph seems to be, but is instead presenting them openly and asking you to consider how you'd respond to his strangeness. There could be a taco truck lady, but considering the note about his wife, I'm not confident. You'll get why in a bit. We get another Joseph scare, him hiding out behind a rock or tree or something and jumping out at Aaron, who, as mentioned, is pretty jumpy and clearly reacts poorly to this. Joseph, laughing, states that Aaron just had a near-death experience and looked, for a second, like he wanted to kill him. An interesting quote from Joseph that you might miss the relevance of on your first watch comes after this, in reference to Aaron's apparent murderous capacity. There's a little Peach Fuzz inside you yet, but I thought Peach Fuzz wasn't dangerous. They eventually do find the formation they were looking for, a little heart-shaped pool of water in the middle of nowhere. That might in fact hold sewage water, but oh well. And Joseph is very excited, happy, satisfied. It's kind of infectious, the joy he exhibits, and it's so alluring that Aaron gets swept up in it, and they share a nice moment together before Joseph asks if Aaron wants to go get food at a nearby diner he used to eat at all the time. Aaron agrees and they make their way there, Joseph commenting that the best thing there is the pancakes. We cut right to the diner, and immediately it seems like Joseph is unfamiliar with the menu. He supposedly vacationed here his entire life, but also didn't know where the two of them were in the woods while they were walking. It's beginning to seem more and more likely that Joseph isn't actually as familiar with the area as he claims to be, and as Aaron calls him out on this, he quickly deflects. It is during this diner scene that Joseph asks if Aaron has ever done something he was ashamed of, and if he would share it with him. Aaron, for whatever reason, accepts and shares a story about him peeing his pants as a child on the playground. I should note, it might just be a little thing, but the story feels more like it's about being embarrassed than being ashamed, but that doesn't really matter. When Joseph reveals the thing that he is ashamed of, it's a lot worse. When Aaron pulled up to the house and couldn't find Joseph, that wasn't an accident. Joseph had been sneaking around the property, taking pictures of Aaron. And as we see the pictures, we realize, with horror, that Joseph got shockingly close to Aaron without him realizing it. We start to get the impression that Aaron is not super observant and that Joseph can be very stealthy when he's trying to be. Those of you who have seen the movie, or have at least picked up on where it's going, might wonder why Joseph would show his hand like this, expose his untrustworthiness so blatantly, but I have a theory for this. Joseph is testing the waters, and kind of has been the whole time. From the very beginning with the pictures, to the initial jump scary introduction, to every subsequent scare to this, he wants to know how much Aaron is willing to put up with, how far he can go before he pushes Aaron away, and time again, as is the case in this scene, Aaron proves to be resilient to Joseph's strangeness, which he might honestly see as a positive quality in himself, but in this case, it puts him in a lot of danger. Aaron forgives Joseph for the photos, who claims that he was just nervous about their meeting and that he no longer distrusts Aaron. Interesting. Joseph is trying to frame things as though Aaron is the untrustworthy one, and there's something interesting going on there. As we both see pretty clearly in the wide shots where both men are present, Aaron is much larger than Joseph, in height and in build. From a distance, if someone was to guess who was a bigger threat to the other, most people would probably guess Aaron. I don't know whether or not Joseph is intentionally utilizing this size differential, especially as we literally only see those two characters depicted during the entirety of the movie, but it's interesting how he attempts to bring attention to the dynamic the two of them share. He's discrediting his own untrustworthiness by calling into question that of Aaron's. Now, if Aaron expresses discomfort at Joseph's behavior, Joseph has set the precedent to throw such claims right back at Aaron. But finally, the night ends, and Aaron and Joseph head back to the cabin. Aaron is ready to go home, but Joseph seems disappointed by this, stating that he was going to pour a drink for Aaron. Aaron, whether or not he recognizes the danger of becoming intoxicated around a person like this, tries to decline Joseph's offer, but Joseph is forceful. He has a way of jumping between awkwardly semi-endearing and intensely intimidating in the same scene, sometimes the same series of moments, demanding he gets what he wants, then apologizing for how he did so. So Joseph and Aaron have a drink, which Aaron tries to wrap up as quickly as possible, and it's at this point that the movie gets a bit more desperate on Joseph's end. First, Joseph says he wants to give Aaron more money, apparently recognizing the financial hardships Aaron is dealing with. He tells Aaron to check his boot, and when Aaron does, he takes that as confirmation that Aaron does need the money. He says that they can figure it out later, extending the amount of time the two would be staying in contact indefinitely, but Aaron has clearly reached a certain threshold for putting up with Joseph, and so as he starts packing up and getting ready to go, Joseph tells him he lied to him about Peach Fuzz. Now, the story he tells about where Peach Fuzz actually came from and how the story relates to his wife is probably not something that you two would be super comfortable with me going into a lot of detail on, so I'll be as vague as possible. After noticing some concerning Google searches from his wife that have to do a lot with animals and them doing things, Joseph brought his wife back to this cabin, then left, claiming to have been called back to work. He actually went to a store where he bought the Peach Fuzz mask, then, while wearing it, broke into the cabin, tied his wife up, and with complete anonymity and lack of consent, did things to her. The way he frames it, she was satisfied by this strange encounter, and the two of them never mentioned it to each other, her apparently not recognizing that it was her own husband who performed this action, but he apparently feels guilty for it. Now, before you start getting really mad at Joseph, a reaction that would be completely understandable after hearing this story, let's talk about a few things. 1. Why did Joseph tell this story to Aaron? Well, because he's trying to speed run their friendship. When the two of them sat down to have their drinks, Joseph did that annoying thing where someone remarks on how great the situation is while adding nothing interesting or commentable to the thought. This is great, huh? Just two guys having some whiskeys. Yep. Whatever reaction you have to this comment, the meaning behind it is clearly that Joseph believes the two of them are getting closer, that they have some rapport that has not been earned yet. After an entire day of making bold and random observations about Aaron, Joseph clearly thinks the two of them understand each other, or at the very least that he understands Aaron, both of which claims are incorrect. And so, as Aaron starts to leave and Joseph feels the relationship slipping through his fingers, he makes a social leap from casual conversation to deep, personal secrets. Close friends share secrets with each other all the time, so in Joseph's head, him sharing the secret means they must be close. But of course, this isn't the case, and only goes to make him that much more threatening to Aaron. 2. How does Aaron want Joseph to react to this? Well, that's a lot easier to figure out, but I think there might actually be two potential answers, and they might both be true. The first is with kindness. Joseph believes Aaron to be kind, and further believes that if Aaron thinks he needs comforting, he'll stay longer. By expressing guilt and shame about this story, he's trying to appear vulnerable, and of course, mix this with the fact that apparently he has cancer, and I think a lot of people would feel guilty walking away from a man in the state that he's in. But further than that, he might also be testing Aaron's limits again. Carefully, thoughtfully, but clearly, Joseph introduces further the fact that there is a predatory nature to him, and not one that he has complete control over. He dresses it up with context and emotion, but is still admitting to something dark and disconcerting, pushing Aaron further and further without going over the edge. And finally, 3. Is this story true? No, it is not. And Aaron's about to learn this firsthand. Despite all of Joseph's efforts, Aaron is set on leaving, but now can't find his keys. They were originally in his jacket, which Joseph makes clear he knew about, but they're not there now. Now look, we're not stupid here. We all know where those keys are by now. But neither of the men mention this suspicion. Aaron just goes about trying to find them in places where they obviously wouldn't be, all while Joseph keeps trying to convince him to stay the night, claiming that Joseph's over the legal alcohol limit and that it's not safe. Aaron snaps, but quickly the atmosphere changes and Aaron begins pouring the two of them more drinks, apologizing for his behavior. There's a lot more alcohol in Joseph's glass. Cut to maybe 20 minutes later and Joseph is fully passed out. Aaron drugged him, clearly illustrating how unsafe he feels. While carefully searching Joseph's pocket for his keys, Aaron finds his phone, which rings suddenly, causing him to run to the bathroom and pick up so the ringer stops. It's Angela, and she's not Joseph's wife. She's his sister. And with this revelation comes the moment that literally every single person who values their own life would simply leave the house. Aaron is instructed to do this by Angela, who claims that her brother has problems, and Aaron realizes that everything is a lie. Joseph doesn't have cancer. He doesn't have a wife. No baby on the way. So what the hell is Aaron doing here? Why did Joseph want him to come here? Joseph is gone when Aaron leaves the bathroom because he's a fucking tank apparently and just powered through all the drugs in his system. Aaron, horror movie protagonist, walks around the house for a while, and by that I mean moves slower than a person who fears for their life should be moving, and encounters Joseph outside on the deck. For some reason, Aaron decides now is the proper moment to call Joseph out on his antics, instead of, not doing that and playing along until he could leave the house. And Joseph's entire demeanor changes. As soon as Aaron states that he spoke to Angela, Joseph sprints away like a little kid. And when Aaron sees him again, he's blocking the front door, peach fuzz mask donned, writhing disconcertingly. The facade has come down now and Aaron is terrified. Joseph rushes Aaron as Peach Fuzz and we get a fake out scene where it seems like Joseph has killed him, dragging unmarked black trash bags to a spot in the woods and beginning to dig as though burying bodies. But then the camera pulls back and we realize that we're actually watching a recording that has been sent to Aaron's house. He made it out. So this is the part of the movie where I get really frustrated at Aaron. He is rightfully concerned and confused about receiving this video at his actual house, obviously indicating that Joseph knows where he lives. And guess what he doesn't do? Move. Go to a friend's house. Buy a gun. Set up security cameras. Do anything to actually prevent Joseph from hurting him. What he does do, as he receives more and more messages from Joseph, is call the cops, which results in nothing happening, and installs new locks on his door, which is certainly something, but not really when Joseph literally told him a story that included him breaking in through a window, which is exactly what he does. One of the packages he sends to Aaron includes a stuffed baby wolf and a knife, which he urges Aaron to use on the wolf. He has this whole hilarious monologue where he implies that he and Aaron are wolves and that wolves kill what they love, which, though I'm not an animal expert, I'm pretty sure isn't true, especially as pack creatures. Maybe he meant alligators, but that's not really the point. I think this scene is meant to, 1, tie in with the underlying wolf theme attached to Peach Fuzz and Joseph's violent tendencies, 2, subtly reference the lone wolf / alpha wolf misconception and how it's often used to explain away violence and cruelty, but most importantly, 3, make very clear to you that Joseph is going to kill Aaron. Spoilers, I guess, but come on. Joseph has told Aaron verbatim that he loves him by now. And I mean, do I have to lay all this out? If Joseph sees himself as a wolf and believes that wolves kill what they love and that he loves Aaron, then what else could he be implying with these messages? Now, minor note, I don't believe Joseph actually thinks of himself as a literal wolf. I think he just gravitates to the iconography. Inside the baby wolf, which Aaron does actually cut into, is a little heart locket with Aaron and Joseph in it. Cute. I'll conclude this video simply with the actual conclusion of the film, because I think it does a really good job of putting a bow on everything that we've been talking about. The very last video that Joseph sends to Aaron is one where he appears to be apologizing for everything. He admits to lying, to doing it often, to having problems that have alienated him from his family, friends, and anyone who could be a positive force in his life. He says he's sorry, that he cares about Aaron, that he wants to make things right. Even this is a manipulation. Once again, even though he's already done so many insane things, Joseph is carefully and thoughtfully lowering Aaron's defenses, switching the narrative so that somehow Aaron feels bad for Joseph. After all the work he has done over the course of their day together, constantly testing and probing at Aaron to see what he responds to, what he cares about, what motivates him, and what scares him, Joseph identifies exactly what to say to get Aaron to see him just one more time. He asks Aaron to drive back out to the lake, where he'll be waiting. It's public, open, and covered in daylight. If you didn't know better, you might think it was safe. I think we'd all like to think that we'd know better by then. In one of the very first shots of the movie, Aaron actually films the lake and comments on it. There's no one there in the shot. Public? Maybe. Active? No. I think we'd all like to think that if we were being obsessively stalked and messaged by someone, that we'd do everything in our power to escape it, to stop it, not to go running back to the person responsible. But what if you thought the only way to stop it was to go to the source? What if, even after everything, you still felt for the guy, just a little bit? Joseph is, for all the work that I've done to lay out exactly what's so intimidating and off about him, a charming guy. He's articulate and friendly, he likes to joke around, and like I said earlier, I think we all know people who are incredibly sociable and yet socially inept. We all know someone who's been down on their luck and hasn't figured out how to deal with it. Hell, we might have been or still be that person. And it's that line of thinking that leads Aaron to the lake, where he sits down on a bench foolishly with his back turned to the road, where Joseph quietly approaches, his steps muffled by the sound of a chainsaw in the distance, donning his peach fuzz mask, where he removes an axe from his coat, the very same axe noticed by Aaron at the beginning of the movie, holds it over his head, and buries it in Aaron's skull. A sickening and subtle pop echoing over the lake. The final minutes of the movie are Joseph watching this scene over and over again, having found the recording Aaron was making of the scene just in case something happened. We realize Joseph, which is likely not his real name, has done this a number of times before, and that he has an entire collection of murdered tapes. The question that lingers on both our and Joseph's mind at the end of the film is, why didn't Aaron turn around? Why would he put himself in that situation? And that question is kind of the point of the whole movie. Why would you stay? Why would you put up with it? Why would you go back? And there are three different answers. I'll leave you with them, and if you'd like, you can tell me which one you believe. 1. The meta answer. It's a horror movie, and Aaron needed to die for the narrative to be completely satisfying. Simple as that, a character doing what the script requires. 2. The thematic answer. Aaron wanted to believe that there was good in Joseph, so he tricked himself into actually believing it. Aaron was a nice person to a fault, and because he was so susceptible to the words of someone clearly so well versed in manipulation, he paid the price. And 3. The Joseph answer. Aaron is the greatest person to have ever lived. Joseph sees his killings as some sort of art form or religious experience, and the sequel film backs this up. He references how foolish of a decision it was for Aaron to set up where he did, to not have turned around. And so, it almost seems like Joseph believes that Aaron did it for him. That the murder was not just a murder, but an act of love. A shared act of love. And just as the credits roll, we get confirmation that Joseph will do it again.
The job is pretty simple, really. All you need is a video camera, yourself, and 8 hours of your time.